What's up everyone, Andrew Baena here, and on today's video I'm going to teach you some of the techniques that I use to learn cover songs as fast as humanly possible while still being at least mostly accurate. So I've been doing covers and heaviest riff compilations and stuff like that on my YouTube channel for over 10 years now, so I figured I'd make a video to share some of the tips and tricks on how I learn a lot of these songs and riffs and breakdowns, because I feel like I'm pretty fast at it and have gotten pretty good at it over time. But I might be a little bit biased. So for this video, we are going to be taking a look at the song called Turning Hate into Rage by Boundaries. I'm not going to be covering the entire song in this video. I'm going to pick about a 30-second to 1-minute chunk of the song, and we're going to focus on that. And again, like I said, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and show you the process of how I would learn that section. We're going to take it a step further, and I'm actually going to show you how I do everything, because if you've watched my videos, you'll know I don't just do guitar covers. I like doing full instrumental covers where I actually fully produce the drums, the bass, the guitar, everything from scratch. And to do that, you have to reprogram all the drums, learn the bass, and learn the guitars. You have to do a lot more than just learn the guitar parts. So I'm going to talk about all of that stuff in this video. Before we move on, I do want to mention as well that this video is sponsored by Lala.ai, and some of the things I'm going to talk about will be utilizing their app. This isn't necessary, and I'm still going to teach you a lot of other techniques on how to cover songs, but this will make it a lot faster and easier in my opinion. Again, you don't need to do it this way, but some of the tips and tricks I am going to mention in this video will be sort of using that tool, so bear that in mind as we continue. And of course, a massive thank you to Lala.ai for sponsoring this video, and after watching this, if you like how it sounds and you think that this might be useful for your work process, I would strongly recommend you to go check them out. There's going to be a link to them over in the description and the pinned comment below. So with that being said, let's get on with it. First and foremost, let's crack open our DAW. If you don't know what this is, I use a program called Reaper, and this is where I record and track everything I do for my videos. So let's start there to begin with. Okay, so the first thing that I do when I cover a song is I drop it in my DAW, which again, like I mentioned, is Reaper. I'm not going to go over the whole template, but as you can see, I basically have a template mix session that I just open every single time and just use this and kind of adjust to taste from there. So the first thing that I do is I'll drag and drop the song in. I've already shortened this a little bit to be at the section of the song I want. So we're going to take a listen to that right now.
It happens every day. With hurt and betrayed.
Right, you get the point. We're not going to listen to the whole thing. So once you have this song in here, the first thing that I like to do is figure out the tempo of the song. The easiest way to do this is two things. Number one is I will zoom in really close on the beginning of a song, and I'll actually find what I call the transient, which I'm pretty sure is the correct term. I could be wrong, but basically what that means is the first like hit or a big waveform. And what I like to do is I like to drag that part to be on grid. You can see this grid line right here. So I like to get it as close as possible, like that. And then I'll cut it, and now the song will start immediately on grid, which is good. Now the next thing we need to do is figure out the tempo of the song. The easiest way to do this is using something called a tap tempo. There are a lot of different programs to do this, but thankfully within Reaper it's built in. So there's actually this thing over here where it has the BPM, and you can actually just tap this and it'll give you like an approximate tempo as the song plays. So if we hit play and literally tap it with our mouse, it's going to help us out.
It happens every day.
Right, so this is going to be approximate, so it's telling me it's about 105 BPM, and it's going to adjust that on the fly. So now what I'm going to do is actually turn on the metronome, and we are going to take a listen to see if that is correct. So it looks like I was slightly wrong. What I'm actually going to do is find this waveform right here. So if we play that, right, that sounds more like the start, so it sounds like this thing is a pickup. So let's just get rid of that for now. We're going to bring that up, or bring that back, sorry, don't worry about it. Okay, so it's close, and what I'm listening for is the click of the metronome matching up with the tempo of the song. So once I get it kind of close like this, I actually just use my ears and kind of adjust it manually. Okay, that's like super close. If you're having a little bit of a hard time with this, you can also double time it. So obviously double 106 would be 212. So let's hear what that sounds like. Cool, so that's really close. So once you figure out the tempo of the song, the next thing that I like to do is figure out the tuning of the song. The way that I think that is the easiest is to literally find the point in the song where it plays the lowest note, and then I just assume that that's the tuning of the guitar. This isn't always the case, but 99% of the time it is. So what we want to be doing now is listening to the song, finding a section of the song that uses the lowest note, and then we're going to be tuning to that note. I also think it's worth mentioning that I know no music theory, so if this is a very weird way to do this, that is why. It's because this is the way my brain perceives music, and it makes sense to me without knowing all the actual theory behind it. Okay, so if we skip ahead a little bit here, we can hear it goes like da 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 dun dun, and those low notes.
You pretend that you can hide.
Right, we're gonna assume that those low notes are probably the lowest notes in the song. So what I'm gonna do next is plug in a guitar. For this, I'm using this Jackson American Soloist because I'm pretty sure Boundaries tunes to drop B. I've covered a few of their songs in the past, and they're usually in this tuning, which obviously is a little bit of an upper hand for me because I kind of have a good idea of what they probably use, but we're gonna take a listen. So it sounds like it's actually that chord. So that leads me to believe that this probably isn't the lowest note of the song. We're gonna take another listen. So it sounds like it's within the range of drop B to drop C. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this is sponsored by Lala.ai, and what this actually is an AI splitter, which is pretty useful. Again, you don't necessarily need this, but it will make your life a lot easier. So basically what you can do is actually drag and drop any song into this, and it can actually split it up into AI assisted stems. So it can take out the vocals and give you just the instrumental, for example, and that will make it a lot easier to hear what's going on in the instrumental. Right? Like so.
It must be to be made new.
So it's basically taking out the vocals, and it's actually pretty cool because you can take it another step further, and when you import a file, you actually have the option for a ton of different things. So you can actually split the drums or the electric guitar or the bass and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is do three things. I'm going to split it so it's the instrumental, the drums, and the electric guitar, because those are the things that I'm going to be needing to figure out for this video. So we're going to go ahead and select drums, go continue, and start processing. And what it'll basically do is listen to the song and extract the drums from it and give me a file that is going to be only the drums, which will make my life much easier when I'm trying to learn a song. So again, you don't necessarily need to do this step. I just think that it makes it a lot easier to figure out what's going on in a song, obviously. And then after this is done, I'm going to do this again, but for the electric guitars, because again, it's going to be way easier to learn what is going on guitars if I can hear the guitars by themselves, right? Okay, so it looks like it's done. So again, now we have the drum file, which is great. I'm gonna reprogram this myself, but this is gonna make it a lot easier to hear what's going on. And then without drums. So it's not perfect, but it's gonna be way easier to hear the notes and figure them out from there. So we're gonna do this one more time and go electric guitar and continue, start processing, and this is gonna do the same process one more time, but it'll give us that file where it's just the guitars, which again, will make my life way easier. So I'm gonna drop all three of these files into Reaper, and then we're gonna continue doing what we were doing. But again, if you don't have this process or don't wanna do this process, you can obviously just use the original version of the song. It's just gonna be a little harder to determine what is going on because you're hearing all the instruments at once, obviously. So again, now that it's done, we can hear the electric guitars by themselves. Okay, so now that I have my split files in my Reaper session, I've just kind of laid them out as follows. I have my drum track and my guitar track here. These again are AI separated stems from the original song, or if you don't have that, of course, I still have my original song here. But again, it'll just be easier to hear what's going on if I use these split tracks because it's easier to hear. Did I just say it'll be easier to hear because it'll be easier to hear? Wow, that's really helpful. You're welcome. Anyways, something I wanted to mention as well is I very slightly altered the tempo. Again, the nice benefit of this is since I'm now able to see all of the transients of the drum track, I realized that since I had the tempo at 212, it was slightly too fast. When I drop this down to 210, however, you can actually see that the grid lines match perfectly with the transients, which means it is 210 BPM. So that will make my life a lot better because now it's actually going to be on time. So I know that's a lot of setup work, but once you do all these things, this is basically the point where I actually start to learn the song. And again, this part can vary depending what you want to do. If you want to just do a guitar cover, obviously you only need to learn the guitar parts. But for myself, since I do full instrumentals, I do everything. But I always start with guitar, so let's do that right now. So the way I like to do this is I basically like to go bar by bar. So I'll take this first section right here, which is this long. 3, 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So we take this first bar and start there. So again, in my case, I can actually solo the guitar track. Actually, honestly, it might be easier to do 2 bars in this case because it's very similar. Right? Okay, so now that's what we're trying to copy on our guitar. I think I might actually be wrong and it might be C. So again, I'm listening for that low note. Okay, so we are actually in drop C, not drop B, so you are learning along with me. I'm making a lot of mistakes in this video, and I guess that's a good thing, because this is how it would be in real life if I was learning it, which I am, so there you go. So what I'm actually going to do really quick is tune up my guitar to drop C instead of drop B. Give me 2 seconds to do that. All right, let's do it. So now let's try learning these first 2 bars. So, da-na-na. To me, it sounds like that. And I also need to figure out that chugging pattern. Okay, so I think that's the first bar. Let's move on to the next bar. Right, so it's similar, but with a different tail end. Right, I think that. Ah, that's tricky. I think that. Right, okay. So the next thing that I like to do is now I'm going to take both of these sections and I'm going to repeat it on loop until I can actually play it properly. So what you can do next is select all 4 bars and then hit the repeat function, which in Reaper is right there. So let's go ahead and do this, and we're literally going to play this over and over and over again with the metronome until I finally get it right. So we can also do the opposite now because we have the drum file, so I can mute the actual guitars and play to the drums. So again, that was obviously sloppy, but you get the point. I'm just learning the riffs as we go, and what I would do next is just keep going and moving on to the next riff and doing the exact same process. So let's move on to the next 4 bars. Right, something like that. Just like that. So we have one more section. It starts out exactly the same with yet another different tail end. Yeah, okay, I get it. So the 3 different variations of the riff that we're looking at should be... Right, so that's what we're looking at. Obviously played a lot faster, but we got it. So there you have it. It took about half an hour to learn like 10 seconds of music, but that's how doing covers goes. So if it takes you a while to learn songs or learn riffs, don't be discouraged. It takes a very long time depending on your skill level. As you can see, that's how long it takes me usually to learn that amount of music for most riffs, unless, you know, some are easier, some are harder, but you get the point. Okay, so for the sake of argument, let's say that that is the only amount of this song that you wanted to cover. So now at this point in time, if you only want to play guitar and only want to record guitar, what you could simply do is just record yourself playing over top of the original drum track like I have here, or if you want to take it a step further, which is the way I do it, you can also take it upon yourself to learn the bass guitar and also reprogram the drums. So this is an optional step, but I'm going to show you how I do that as well. So I have my own drum track going on down here, and what we're going to do next is reprogram the drums using my own programs because it'll sound more consistent and it will sound a little bit better than the AI split, obviously, because this is trying its best, but it's going to get some artifacts and stuff like that. So for my drums lately, I have been using the Mixwave Lorna Shore Austin Archie kit. So sounds like that, looks like that. So what I like to do next is I'm going to select the time frame that I am programming in, go insert, new MIDI item, and it's going to give me this big blank MIDI block. And what we are going to do now is very boring, but we are literally going to reprogram the entire drums. So I'm not going to show this entire process, but I'll give you some tips and tricks along the way. So first and foremost, the easiest thing about this is, again, we can actually visually see the transients of all the drums going on, which will make our lives a lot easier. So what I like to do is I like to open the keyboard like this and zoom it way in. So I have all my keys labeled here. As you can see, I have kick, snare, toms, so on and so forth. So what I like to do first is I like to start with the kick and the snare. So we're gonna go ahead and try to do the first 2 bars here, like so. Right, so that part, I think was the pattern. I personally do everything as 16th notes because I just find it easier to visually see it that way, but we're literally gonna start clicking every single time there's supposed to be a note. It's very boring, it's very tedious, but it will sound cool, trust me. And the reason I like to do it this way first is because the kick and the snare are pretty much the foundation of any song, and that will be the easiest 2 drums to pick out what exactly they're doing. So it should sound something like this. Okay, so we got the first bar done. Let's do the second bar. So now we have the first 2 bars like so, with only the kick and the snare. Cool. And then the nice thing about this is you can basically just copy and paste it because it's going to be slightly different, but almost the same. I noticed there was a little bit of different variation on the kick drum, so we're going to take an extra special listen to that. So you can hear there's an extra kick here. And then of course you can solo the original drum track to double check. So you can hear that there isn't a kick here. So now we have the first 4 bars, kick and snare like so. So much like the guitars, we're just going to move on to the next section and take a listen. Okay, so luckily for us, it sounds like it is exactly the same except for a fill on the very end. So I'm literally going to copy and paste this entire section. Cool. Okay, so I'm hearing there's a little extra something over here, so let's mute our drum track and just listen to the original. So it's like a little fill going on here. So it should be something like this. Okay, so I feel like you get the point, and I don't actually need to show you this entire process, but once I do all the snare and the kick, the next thing is the cymbals and the toms, and so on and so forth. So I'm just gonna kind of time-lapse this and skip ahead because this is not gonna be helpful to you. But all I'm doing is reprogramming the drums, and it sounds like... Okay, so that's what it sounds like now. This obviously might not be perfect, but for the sake of what I'm trying to do, it is close enough. The only other thing I'll do in addition to this, again, is to actually just highlight literally everything except for the kick and snare. And all I will do is click the H key, which is the humanize key in Reaper. I'm sure your DAW might have something similar. And all I do is humanize it to like 15-ish%. And this will just help it so the cymbals aren't always cranked at the max velocity. I personally like the sound of triggered kick drums, so I like leaving these at max. And then for the snares, I like to go in and humanize those as well, but much less, maybe like, 5%, just a tiny bit to give it a little bit of variation and make it sound at least somewhat human. So now that we have my own version of the drums, we can totally ignore the AI split version of the drums right here. But if I go ahead and unmute the guitar track, you can hear the original song's guitar track with my drums. So now, ironically, the next part, which is probably the most important part that most of you are here for, is to actually finally record the guitars. So again, remember all the riffs that we already learned earlier in this video. Now we're simply going to go ahead and record them. And what I like to do here is I like to record 2 versions of the same exact riff. This is called double tracking. Every song you've ever heard pretty much will have at least double tracking, if not quad tracking. And all that means is there are 2 takes of the same version of the guitar riff on both the hard left and the hard right side. So when you listen through headphones, for example, you're getting the guitar in both ears. It's not down the middle or only to one side, because that would sound really weird. So yeah, the next step is to just practice that riff that you learned and record it over and over and over again until you finally have some solid takes that you want to keep, like so. Over and over, like I said. We'll get there eventually. So once you have painstakingly recorded yourself playing guitar over and over and over again until you finally get it right and track it twice, it'll sound something like this. Just like that. And the final thing we have to do before we are done recording is, of course, record bass. This time around, I'm just going to assume that the bass guitar is probably doing the same thing as the guitar, so let's go ahead and do that. Ugh. Okay, and now that you are done recording bass, with all of that done, you finally have your 15-second long cover, which will sound something like this. And there you go. That is how I cover songs. So as you can see, this is quite a tedious project, and like I said throughout this video, depending on what your goals are, you can definitely make this a lot simpler on yourself. You don't have to do a full instrumental cover. If you just want to play guitar over the original song or the drum tracks, obviously this is way easier, but nonetheless, I feel like all the tips and tricks I've mentioned in this video are useful regarding of the complexity of the cover that you are trying to do. So with that being said, that's kind of where I am going to end this video. Once again, I want to give a massive thank you to Lala.ai for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in their program, which will assist you in making covers like this, go check it out. The link is in the description and the pinned comment below. And last but not least, a massive thank you to all my Patreon members whose names are on the screen at this point in time. If you're interested in audio downloads, guitar tabs, stems, or a shout out on the screen for most of my videos, you can go check out my Patreon page, which is also linked in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you soon.